All right, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Sunday. End of the weekend here is upon us. Well, we still got the rest of Sunday here to enjoy, right? 12:23 p.m. California time, November 23rd, 2025 is the date here. Latest activity shows a 2.1 up across Alaska, a little bit of larger movement up there across the Adak, Alaska, up there along the Aleutian Trench. Late last night and early this morning, 5.5 and a 4-pointer stirring up along that Aleutian Trench, a major subduction zone. Also, a pretty decent uptick of earthquakes here across the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. Bunch of 4 stirring up. Also, got some interesting activity over here across Oregon. We had a 3.2 earthquake this morning near Amity, Oregon. That's northwest of Salem, about 10 miles or so. While not a big earthquake, it is somewhat deep, about 10 miles or so underneath this area. Some reports coming in around Salem and the vicinity of that felt earthquake. Let's see here. That, like I say, it's about 10 miles deep underneath this area. There is some historical earthquake activity out here. I did pull this up, went back through the USGS records here, and this is what they have far as 3.0 and above. There's our 3.2 this morning up near McMinnville, Oregon. There was a 5-pointer back in 1896. That one, decent size event. No big earthquake activity out here far as 6s or 7s go. But I expect here, when things get to the point of maximum pressurization out here across the Cascadia, we'll see an uptick in earthquake activity across the North American plate here, where that strain is, sometimes transfers off of while the locked area, remains locked. We'll see that a little bit of earthquake activity pick up. That's, at least it would make sense in my mind. We would see, elevated activity out here across the Coast Range. Could be deep, could be surface fractures, but that's an interesting quake. Really not around any fault systems out here. And look at the satellite view here, shows it's, obviously no, I don't think there's any pumping operations up there in Oregon as far as oil pumping operations go, but at least definitely not in that area. So we'll continue to watch that. The Cascadia subduction zone there, I'll show you guys real quick, has been, let's go back to this map, amplified, but mainly down south here. 228 epicenters from yesterday. Those are slow slip events. That is a sign that stress is building up along the locked area of the Cascadia subduction zone. You don't get these tremors because of release of strain. The tremors are being picked up because the plates here, the Juan de Fuca plate and the North American plate here. You got the subducting Juan de Fuca plate here as a whole. There's technically 3 separate plates, but we'll just call it the Juan de Fuca plate. As the tremor activity is being recorded downstream into the deeper area of the Cascadia, that tells me that it's managing to push further down underneath this area, but also fold in on this area, have this area, the locked region, fold in on itself as that strain is accumulating, kind of like a spring, and that will rebound one of these days in a giant earthquake. It's very simple when you look at these GPS stations here as to what's going on out there across the Cascadia. For example, we use this one near Brookings at the southern end of the Cascadia. This is vertical displacement. This is a GPS station showing at least 60 mm of accumulated slip since 2008. But if you go back to 1700 when the last big earthquake struck, you can imagine that's up there in quite a few feet. So when the earthquake does happen out there, all that strain that's been, kind of folding in on itself, accumulating strain, it's going to finally slip and release, and this land is going to drop during that whole process of big earthquake, the Coast Range. And that's not a good thing, because then you have to worry about a tsunami coming in, right? Just got to be prepared out there. Make sure you have some type of evacuation plan. If that, well, when it happens, it's definitely going to happen. It's not a matter of if. But we do have some, like I said, interesting earthquake activity out there. I like to look at these events because it could definitely be pointing to something about ready to kick off out here. Let me go back to the trimmer map here and look at the last month of data. Most of it has been down south. There's been a lot up north. It's been skipping over this area, so there's not a whole lot of slip going on, but it doesn't mean it's not locked. It definitely is. If you go back here to, we can just go back to like May of this year and cover the data up until now. You'll see that it has definitely filled in. This is a pretty good map of where the Cascadia subduction zone is. As far as the trimmer area is, this is the deeper area of the Cascadia. The locked area is offshore, a little bit underneath the land here, but it's building. Got ourselves a big mega quake in the brewing out there. It's it's cooking. I'm trying to think of a recipe. Well, it's going to be a recipe for disaster, but not good. Anyway, and what else I was finding interesting out here, let me go back to this map here, seismograph station map, is that around the Salem area where that earthquake struck, there's some weird signals showing up out here. Salem, Oregon. You guys see that? It's a little weird. The 3-pointer, 3.2 near Salem is going to be, I'm guessing it's going to be this little blue one right here, but man, that looks like earthquake activity. And a lot of it. I'll go back here and check out another seismograph station a little bit further south here. See if we pick up that same type of reading. Well, there's a 3.2 in Salem showing up there. There's a lot less in terms of those readings there, so I'm not for sure what that noise is. It almost looks like earthquake activity, but then again, it would be showing up very similar, to this seismograph station that's just down south a little bit. Let's check up over here. There's Silverton, Oregon. Yeah, see, those aren't picking up really. There's a 3-pointer. So it's just kind of a weird noise out there. I do like to verify and see if that is indeed legit earthquake activity, by looking at a number of seismograph stations in the area. But I don't see it showing up there, so I'm really not for sure what that noise is. But anyway, earthquake activity up there. Watch the Cascadia, Mount St. Helens, and Mount Rainier. We'll go back over here to the PNSN network. I use this page a lot. There's a lot of information on here when it comes to monitoring data. This is up at Mount St. Helens. We'll just give a quick glance here at the volcano activity. See if there is any. Pretty quiet out there. There's a 3.2 showing up there in Mount St. Helens from Salem. That's decent. The seismograph station is almost perfect in terms of the amplitude and sensitivity. There is a couple other seismograph earthquakes, and they're very small. And of course, it doesn't look like any of those got reported, I don't think. Let me go back over here to the other map. Yeah, a couple from yesterday. Up at Mount Rainier, 1.3 early in the morning at 2:22. So that should definitely show up at Mount Rainier for that magnitude. And we're going to check, we'll go up here and then we'll check out the other one here. So 2:22 in the morning, you guys spot it? Pretty easy, right? That's it. Well-defined earthquake. Not anything big, but it is relatively shallow. It's a 1.3. Somewhat bigger than the smaller very small microquakes that we've been seeing up there. I'm going to get rid of that page because I keep clicking back on it. But as far as anything else major going on, I don't see it. There's a couple smaller quakes that are, half of this size of that 1-pointer. So obviously these are going to be much smaller in terms of magnitude. But no major uptick going on there for now. I don't see anything of interest. And that's at the seismograph station off to the northeast. This one here a little bit closer to the summit area. I'm sure picked it up as well. But there's something going on here. It's just way overblown. Could have something to do with all the massive ice built up from these last couple storms up there. It can happen. It definitely can. So at least we got one decent one working there in the vicinity of that region. Northern California. See, there's actually a couple earthquakes here as well outside of Merlin, Oregon this morning. Getting these quakes well inland, away from the Cascadia, but it has everything to do with the Cascadia because of the stress and strain that gets accumulated and then forced inland because of the fold and thrust belt here. That's literally what it's called. It's folding in on itself because of the accumulation of strain as a result of the subducting slab here, the Juan de Fuca plate. Nothing big, but definitely getting those signs of some stress out there. Northern California, 2 of them from last night. Nothing big going on there for now, but watch the Cascadia. It's coming up, I think. I want to show you guys something real quick here. See if I can. Do I have it? Yes, I do. Here it is. If you haven't seen this page, and I've got quite a few new viewers out here and subscribers since I've shared this image and this page. It's called survivingcascadia.com. This has everything you could even possibly imagine when it comes to your questions on the Cascadia. How far the land's going to drop, the time between the big earthquake and the subsequent tsunami, but also it has something to do with the time of regular intervals there across the Cascadia. This is a 10,000 year historical look at the Cascadia reoccurrence interval lengths. Okay, now here within the last 4,000 years or so, and they go around, they can study this. Okay, there's offshore sites where they can see where sediment has been disturbed, disrupted, and whatnot due to big earthquakes. Turbidites, I believe, is the word they use up here. But yeah, okay, so let's look at this last 4,000 years here. Read this. Okay, look at this. There's been 20 Cascadia subduction zone events, including the partial ruptures, right? Magnitude 8.0. Around 8.0 to 8.4 is your partial ruptures. And then you get up into the full ruptures after that. And they can go up above 9. So the last 20 events, including partial and full ruptures, there's been no earthquakes that have gone, no intervals that have gone longer than 325 years. There's been 19 intervals less than that, right? So it looks like the Pacific Northwest has gone longer than 100% of known times between earthquakes in the last 4,000 years. The longest interval was 291 years. So we're at 325 years. The last big one was 1,700. So, we are not in the middle. We're not in the beginning. We're past the end and beyond to where we should see at least a partial rupture, if not a full rupture of the Cascadia subduction zone in the last 4,000 years. If you go back the last 6,000 years, there's only been 2 intervals there that have gone longer than 325 years. But 93% of the known times between these 29 events, the current time where we're at right now, we've gone longer than 93% of known times. And if you were to go back 10,000 years, then you could say that, well, we've had 7 intervals that have been longer than 325 years. That's why they come up with the number of 250 to 500 years. But if you look here, the time between the Cascadia events are getting shorter. They're not getting longer. So that 500-year reference, they're just adding on that 10,000 years of data. But as we get closer to our current time period, those intervals, they're getting shorter and shorter. The last 20 of them here, in terms of Cascadia earthquakes in the last 4,000 years, there's been none that have lasted as long as where we're at right now. So that in itself is an eye-opener. But go check out this site. Man, it's got so much information here. On possibilities, percentages. Here's the number of years in between major events and whatnot. It's pretty crazy. I mean, I haven't even read through it all, but there's this is just one page. There's an option for everything up here. Timing of events, what would happen, say for In the wintertime, does the drop in elevation happen more or less evenly over the course of the shaking? Just a bunch of different questions that are answered out here by official people, professors and whatnot. It's definitely some big, useful information there. I may have to read over that today. I don't have a lot going on today, so I may check that out. But it's called survivingcascadia.com. All right, I know we spent a lot of time there in the Pacific Northwest, but there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of potential. One of these days, the big 9-pointer out here is going to alter a lot of the Coast Range. Bay Area, a couple earthquakes this morning outside of Gilroy. That's down there across the southern end of the Calaveras Fault. Nothing big going on. We got anything above 2.5? A couple of those, 2.7 near the Octello region, that's way down south, and the Johannesburg area up along the Garlock Fault shear zone. No major swarming going on here across Southern California for now. It's starting to pick up a little bit, but this is more of your daily average count. I mean, the last 2 days there was only like 7 earthquakes up here on the map, and that was pretty crazy. No big earthquake activity yet, but we have that big time potential in the near future. Not fear-mongering. I'm just stating the facts here, folks. I'll say it again. We cannot say that, well, we already had a big earthquake here in 2019, right? The Ridgecrest earthquakes. We already had big earthquakes. It's going to be a long time before we see another one. That was nothing to do with the San Andreas Fault. That was on the Little Lake Fault over here. Imagine this little bitty fault system that's a result of the plate boundary motion here. Imagine what the big one can do, though. We're expecting an 8.1 out here across Southern California. I know I've been hearing about it for years. It's never going to happen. It's so crazy what the comments are out here sometimes. You keep saying that. It's never going to happen. All right, oil fields. Still some movement out there. Yellowstone, nothing showing up on the map, but that, got to remember it's the Yellowstone weekend. It's the weekend, but at Yellowstone, they tend to not report anything above 2 or below 2.5. So we're going to go over and double check the recorded seismograph stations here, see what we got. That earthquake is the event in Alaska. Look at Alaska, still pretty busy. I think something's brewing up here along the Aleutian Trench, closer to the Gulf of Alaska. So I believe that's that one, right? That would that was at just about 12:30. Yeah, so this would match the 1:30 time period because they're 1 hour ahead of me, Mountain Time. So yeah, that's the 5-pointer there along the Aleutian Trench. A couple other smaller quakes out there as well, but those are probably well below 2.0. And that's at Yellowstone. Just, they're not going to report it because it's the preliminary system out there. When earthquakes happen, the geologists and scientists in charge, they tell the computer not to put out that earthquake unless it's above a certain threshold. That's how it is. That's how it's always been there at Yellowstone. But they'll get to it, hopefully, Monday morning after review. They'll add those earthquakes back on the map, and we'll check them there tomorrow morning. I may have to wait till Monday evening because depending on how early my update is tomorrow. New Madrid seismic zone quiet for now. Another earthquake out here in the Lafayette, Georgia area, 3:37 in the morning, 2.4. All right, so taking a glance here at the earthquake activity, it's definitely noticeable. We got some major adjustment taking place up here along the northern and the northwestern corner of the Pacific Plate. Deep earthquake activity there along the Izu Trench. Watch the Nankai Trough there. These deeper quakes can definitely strain things out there. Nothing big happening up here for now, but I do think this is leading to something a little bit bigger. And I got my eyes here around this area of the Aleutian Trench. You can see it more within this zone here. A lot of activity lately here inland and deep. This latest one of 4.1, 88 miles deep. If we go back here and check, I'll just show you guys here real quick. When was our last, 7-pointer is a decent size event up there. I'm going to go back and look at this real quick, okay? Stand by. Just this area of the Gulf of Alaska, because this is, I'm more concerned with this area because we've seen an 8.1 out here back in 2021. We've seen a 7, I think it was a 7.4, 7.5 here around Sand Point, Alaska this year. So, and then we've seen activity back over here, but not into this section. So I just want to look here real quick, see what we got when our last earthquake of sizable activity was, because that gives you a good indication of what could be coming up here. It's a major subduction zone that's got some super high slip rate. 7.1 inland back in 2018. There was a 7.9 prior to the subduction zone. Look at that one back in 2018 here. That's a little odd. That means that this area is pretty well strained when you see activity back off of that subduction zone. Yeah, and then 7.9 back in 1900. We're lacking big earthquake activity right here. Historically, yes, there was a 9.2 well inland back in 1964. That was a big one. And this area can easily see another 9-pointer out here. Easily. A little absent, though, of earthquake activity, specifically along that subduction zone. I know they can happen inland and previous, but it looks a little quiet out there specifically. 7.0 back in 1899, 8.2, 7.9. So yeah, we'll just watch that area, folks. I'm just kind of pointing out some areas of interest. I'm not forecasting an earthquake, stating that, yes, there's going to be an earthquake there. But when you look at historical data and all this movement, it's an area to watch here because of the lack of recent large-scale activity within that subduction zone there. And with the uptick going on, yeah, makes sense to watch it. Curl-Cam Chatka, a bunch of forest stirring up there. It's a bunch of aftershock activity, but you can call it aftershock activity from the 8.8. I see it as increasing pressure, creating further earthquake activity in the region. It's not just that area. It's down here. It's up there. So that tells me that pressure is increasing across this area of the plate boundary. And Alaska, latest quake, 4.1. And then, was that another 1.4 a little bit later? Watch that area. Philippines area, fairly quiet. There's some activity further south there. It looks like maybe a 5-pointer southern end of the Philippine Trench from yesterday. A couple more 4s there since last night. Nothing big going on there for now. A little crunch going on in the typical crunch zone. I call it the crunch zone. Why do I call it the crunch zone? Because if you look at the general plate stress models here, notice the arrows pointing all towards each other, all towards this region here of the crunch zone. That's just kind of how I call it. I'm kind of calling it like I see it. That's where all the plates tend to, not all of the plates, but in general, the bigger ones around this area, putting that region in quite a bit of crunch. That's why we're always seeing earthquake activity there. Always. Nothing major going on here across the area of New Zealand. There's some 2s and 3s. Nothing big going on for now. Still got some activity in Turkey, although it looks like there's some 2s, maybe some 3s further west there. I wonder if we're starting to get another area of swarming going on, maybe a newer region. We'll take a quick glance here at Campe Flegrei fields out there around Italy, just see what's going on for earthquake activity. The swarms up here in Turkey, there's been 2 specific ones here. Looks like there's another swarm happening just over here to the west. And I do believe firmly that this has something to do with the previous swarm earlier this year down around the Santorini volcano area. Those are some pretty deep earthquakes. That has since died off, but now we got swarming like crazy up here. Maybe a new swarm. Something definitely brewing out here in this region. Around the Italy area, Camp 8 for the Gray Fields, we got a number of earthquakes there. I don't see anything big. The biggest one was a couple days ago, 2.4 within that area, but I don't see any major uptick. Nothing of any noteworthy mentioning for now. Atlantic Ocean, got a couple earthquakes out here today. Nothing big. Some forests scattered out and about. South America looks typical. Same for the Middle America Trench up here. So we'll just kind of keep an eye on things. So the largest earthquake so far today, what do we got? That's going to be that 5.5 after midnight in the Dak, Alaska area. Nothing big. As far as any uptick goes, yeah, there's definitely some uptick. Would I call it unprecedented? Probably not. I don't see any major event. We still have this coronal hole facing us right now, directly squared up with us. I know you can probably see it better on this one, but this image is about a day old, so this is more positioned over here. In fact, it's 2 days old, it looks like. It's over here now, center disk. This one's 2.5 months old. Why there's so many old images, I don't know, but that's why sometimes I'll show the UV image here. This is recent, the latest UTC time there, 2041. We'll see what happens with that lined up. I mean, I'm not seeing anything that tells me that there's any activity that's not normal out here. We're always getting some, uptick across certain areas when the plates begin to shuffle up and move. Yes, it's definitely active up here across this area. But as far as any broad, major movement happening globally with big earthquakes because of a coronal hole facing us, not yet. But we'll give it a day or two and see how these magnetic lines that shoot out from this area, they shoot out directly into space, see how it affects the planet in the coming days. I'm thinking a couple days, it shouldn't have to take a couple weeks or months or years, It's like, come on. All right, anything else major going on? Well, we got a 5-pointer stirring up over here along a portion of the Java Trench right now. Pretty quiet there as far as larger quake activity, so it looks like that's starting to fill in slightly. Nothing, like I say, nothing major yet, but it could be one of those days. Let me go back here to the space weather, see what we got for flaring activity. B 7.4. Hello. That's pretty low. And it's been pretty much hovering around the B flare and C flare category line there the last couple days. Really not a whole lot of sunspots out there that are capable of producing anything other than a couple weak C flare events. See that? Very, very quiet. Hold on a second. Although, just looking at this, let me go back down here. The center portion here does look a little bit more complex than what it did yesterday. So we'll watch that. Maybe seeing a little growth stage happening. If that happens, then we'll see the flare threat bump up a little bit. But it's the only area really on the sun that's worth mentioning that's capable of producing some C flare activity. Maybe an M flare if it does decide to further grow there. Flare threat right now at about a 15% chance for M flare, X flare around 1% or less. Sliver of a moon out there, if you can spot it. No major roars there in the forecast for now. We'll take a quick glance at the next close approach asteroids to the planet. That's all we need, some more doom and gloom out here, right? But I think we're safe. I'm pretty certain we are. Got to keep a positive mindset, right? Millions of miles for some of these. Look at that one. Holy smokes. Yeah, that is a big one there. It's been tracked since 2016. November 24th, so that's tomorrow. I think that was on here a couple days back, and then we just get these newer ones that kind of fill up the list, pushing this one back. But, yeah, that's a big one. You definitely want to keep that millions of miles away. Everything else out here looks fairly safe as well for now. We've got a slight risk of severe weather across Texas. Looks like Midland, Fort Stockton area. Got a 2% chance there for some tornado activity, wind, and of course Texas knows how to produce the big-time hail out there. It's always a hatched area out there in Texas. Got a chance there for some significant 2-inch diameter hail or larger within about 25 miles of a point. So that's a pretty big deal around Midland, Odessa, Big Spring. Heads up. All right, taking a glance here at the numerical models. We're going to put this into motion. We'll watch these storms firing up there across Texas today, later this afternoon and evening. West Coast, not a whole lot going on for precipitation. You know, there's definitely some major changes going on here with a deep, cool pool of air coming down, being displaced from Canada. Talking to snow maybe down to Amarillo, New Mexico area. That's a pretty good shot of cold air for this time of year. And, man, I wish I could say there's a major change coming up for California, but I don't see anything out there. That is not good. Look at this. I say that because I live here. I live in Northern California. If I lived here or somewhere up in the Washington or Montana, yeah, I'd be like, okay, well, California, no rain for you for the next 2 weeks. But, you know, we've had a lot of rain for November, but we don't want to get into that pattern of where we're going to see a dry winter. I've seen it happen out here in 2020, the winter of 2020-21. That we had a similar event. Everything was nice and rainy, and then it just dry the rest of our rainy season. That was a horrible year for water season out here in California. So hopefully that changes. Let me take a look here at the Climate Prediction Center. Their forecast models. 8 to 14 day, well below. Near term, of course, well below. Look at that. Everywhere except for the West Coast right now. I hope that changes. 3-month outlook. Yikes. Not favoring the West Coast. Hopefully that changes there, folks. All right. I am going to call it, well, I'm not going to call it night. I'm just going to call it an update here. Look at the Kagoshima station. That's near the Nankai Trough. Look at all that earthquake activity popping up on it. Let me go over here and see what the Japan agencies are reporting. They're not really reporting a whole lot as far as within that area. But looking at that seismograph station, you know, that's lighting up with a whole bunch of earthquake activity. We did have that super deep earthquake over here along the Izu Trench, 307 miles deep. Watch this area right here. That's a major subduction zone. A lot of stress and strain happening out here. So we'll see what happens, folks. Be an interesting little test here for the coronal hole facing us, directly lined up. If you hear me come back here this afternoon with a large event, then I guess it will be one for the books there of seeing some elevated activity with that coronal hole facing us. In the meantime, have yourself a wonderful Sunday. We'll catch you guys back out here a little bit later. Take care.